So delighted as a district staff this afternoon to present to you an opportunity we are asking for action on this evening. This is the Needs-Based Public School Capital Fund by the North Carolina Education Lottery Funds from North Carolina. This is an opportunity for our district to receive one-time money in the amount of $40 million for a middle school with, of course, a matching fund of local dollars from local funds, and that is from our commissioners. I'm going to ask Mr. Bill Graham to please present this opportunity to you at this time, and at the end, I will ask for your vote. Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, the rest of the board, thank you for meeting and having this opportunity to discuss this. I apologize that we're not able to see the brief slideshow, but you can use your imagination for this. So basically, just before Christmas break, the Department of Public Instruction issued guidance about this grant. Actually, it came out December 17th. And shortly after we returned from the break, Dr. McLean reached out to Mrs. Day and me, asking that we investigate this to see if this might be something we could pursue. The Needs-Based Public School Capital Fund was established to assist counties with their critical public school building capital needs. Grants from this fund are funded with revenue from the education lottery, as Dr. McLean mentioned. In the past, we have not been eligible because Granville County is not considered a Tier 1 county. We are Tier 2 county, which is the North Carolina Department of Commerce does an analysis of counties and assesses them based on their need, their critical needs. So we have not been eligible for this in the past, but this year we are. Grant funds must be used only for construction of new school buildings and additions, repairs and renovations. Grant funds cannot be used for real property acquisition or capital improvements on administrative buildings, so schools only. Okay, this grant is for schools only. Counties receiving grants are required to provide local matching funds from the county funds in accordance with General Statute 115C-546.11. A chart, along with accompanying the grant, a chart was provided that indicates how much each county is to match. For Granville County, it's 5%. So what we're talking about here is that in order for us to apply for this grant, the county commissioners have to agree to match up to 5% of this. Okay. The due date for the grant application is March 15th. Let's see, I've got in my notes self-explanatory as though you were seeing the slide, so let me just check. Just letting you know that the maximum awards, up to $30 million for an elementary school, up to $40 million for a middle school, and up to $50 million for a high school. So these are the awards in the grants. Applications are evaluated based on critical needs, budget details, and 7 specific criteria which are used for prioritizing the applications. Mrs. Day and I explored possibilities related to this grant, and Mr. Clement in the maintenance department and his team worked on reviewing the master facilities plan as well as listing various needs in the district. We compiled a list of needs that might be addressed by this grant, but then Dr. McLean came to us with a thought. That thought was, what about Holly? And so we looked into that. And it turns out that that ends up being a very good use of this grant money. And I'll give you more information about that in just a second. These grants are competitive. However, there are a few factors that are in our favor. We have had previous studies done on Holly, as you well know. You got the 2019 study, and then there was the 2020 study on what we could do with Holly. So those studies that have been done on the project demonstrate a clear need. And this is a crucial part of being awarded the grant. Additionally, there's a strong sentiment in the community for preserving the legacy of G.C. Hawley, and renovation of the school entirely will help preserve that. This would also speak to having a middle school in that part of the county, which is something to consider as we were having these discussions and making these decisions about what would happen. I know that one of the concerns was, the need for a middle school in that part of the county as we were looking at moving to Butnerstaff. So the possibility of this grant also speaks to that. So I did want to let you know that there are, of these 7 criteria, we meet 5 of them without any question, okay? Counties with greater need and less ability to generate sales tax and property tax revenue. Counties with a high debt-to-tax ratio. The extent to which the project will address critical deficiencies and adequately serving the current and future student population. Projects with new construction or complete renovation of existing facilities, and counties that have not received a grant in the previous 3 years. So what I'm referring to is in the grant itself, there is a list, and it shows these criteria, these 7 criteria, and we clearly meet, 5 of them. We're not a tier 1 county, but that this year is not a consideration. So that puts us, I think, in very good stead. So we are asking this afternoon for the board to approve the staff to move forward with the application for this grant for the renovation of G.C. Hawley. Now, at this time, I'm prepared to answer questions, which I'm sure you have 1 or 2 of.
So I do have a question. I think if we could get this would be really fantastic, because I think definitely we need this. My question is, because we still do need to address capacity issues, right? So if we were to build Hawley exactly as it currently is, and I'm assuming the way that we had the plans made for, it would still be too large for what we technically need if you combine that with the capacity at Butner STEM Middle. So can we make a slightly smaller middle school so that it's not, so that we're not having to still have empty classrooms, I guess is my question.
Yeah, we don't have to build exactly what's there.
Okay.
So, yes. So in talking with some folks about the grant, we're just looking at what's the population now, what square footage would be appropriate for that based on DPI guidelines and recommendations. And, I know the staff has ideas on what they would like to see in this facility, some exciting, innovative programs, for example. But yes, we're not constrained. It doesn't have to be exactly, replace what's there.
Yeah, because I would just say that probably my biggest concern is I just don't want to see us, another 5-10 years down the road having to address capacity issues because we
Correct.
built Hawley too
That's
large.
correct.
So.
Yeah, understand.
Mr. Graham,
There you are.
do you have a good handle or idea on what the turnaround time is for approving
April.
April?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it would put us in
Yes, ma'am.
April,
Yes.
knowing one way or the other.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's pretty short time,
Mhm.
so that sounds good.
And another question I have is, do we get the funds all at once, or do they come in?
It's spread out over a couple of years.
Okay, so then how would?
There's a schedule.
There is a schedule, okay.
You need more details?
Yeah, well, I was just curious, so I guess from start to finish, when, is there an estimation of when Hawley, the project would be completed by, so that,
2 years project.
Okay.
Would be 2 years of building Hawley and having it ready.
Okay.
I have a comment, sir. We had engineering firm ES3P do a sketch of what Hawley would look like and some recommendations. we still have that. I mean, that
Yes.
might be something we want to look at before we do anything else. But I don't think, well, we need to build what we need. If we go that route, we need to build what we need. And a lot of what's there now, what we need won't look the same for sure, because, you know, that school was built 100 years ago, and things have changed considerably since then. But I think some of the work may have already been done because of the study we had done earlier.
That's correct.
So,
For purposes of the grant, we are using the 2020 study as documentation to say this is what we have in mind.
right.
So that study that you had from LS3P in 2020 is,
That's correct, Mr. Graham. For the purposes of this fast timeline, this grant is due March 15th. One of the benefits we see as a plus for us is that we have the schema already to present along with the application to say we have this background work, and there were 3 scheme patterns presented to us. So we plan to submit all 3, not that we can't change it, because if you also just sort of go back and pay attention to some of the conversations we've had, there are expectations that the southern end of our county should grow over the course of the next 3, 5 to 10 years. So I agree, we want to build something that will accommodate the growth in the southern end of the county. At the same time, I must add that Hawley is already one of our schools that continues to increase in enrollment every year. It's one of those places. So we're excited about that. And I must add this, Mr. Graham probably laughed a little bit because when he said Dr. McLean had some things in mind, I do. If you're going to build something, remember we came in right around $30 million. This is for $40 million. So we need to build a state-of-the-art facility, and people like shiny and new for their children. My hope is that this will attract more middle school families to our district.
This study that we've done, I have a copy of it, that was done in March of 2021.
Yes.
And this is what you all talking about using.
Yes, sir. The
for
latest.
application. And like I said, it's for almost $10 million less than what the grant is. So we can upgrade some stuff.
Absolutely. And we will know in April whether we receive this grant or not.
And Dr. Graham, you mentioned the match, but what would the county need to come up with?
the county's match, 5% would be $2 million.
$2 million.
So you would, the commissioners would be required to contribute?
That's
5%.
correct. And speaking to growth, Dr. McLean mentioned growth. I know, I talked to Dr. Winborn just briefly this morning. We were looking at some new documents that just came in on developments in that part of the county. So we're looking at 4 developments that have been submitted since November, that we've been made aware of. So these are going to happen. 300 sites, homes.
There's one other factor we got to keep in mind. This study was done in 2021, and I believe when it was done, the costs were going up like 10%
Correct.
a year. Well, it doesn't take long to come to the fact that we may not even, at that amount of money, we may not even be able to do all that we want to because of the increase in costs.
And I just want to add with regards to that, you're right, as things are going up and, cost and everything, but definitely we're not starting from the ground. We already have some building there and, one that had been upgraded and everything, so we're not starting from scratch. And I really think that, this would be a good fit for making that happen. And like you mentioned about the increase in, developments and everything, it's going to happen. It's already happening. And more companies
Yes,
are
ma'am.
moving into that area, Wake Forest, Raleigh
Yeah.
area.
What I've seen, it's more than a notion. what I've
Yes,
seen.
it's more than that.
Mr. Graham, you said we meet 5 out of 7 criteria. What are the 2 things the 2 areas we are falling short in?
It's not that we're falling short, it's just, goodness. just doesn't apply. Like the one area is that we're not a tier 1.
Oh, okay.
You know, we're a tier 2. I'll have to get back with the second one. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
What was the second? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
He said he'd have to do that.
I'll have to get back to you. I have it.
Okay.
I have it over there on my table.
Okay. Board, other questions for Mr. Graham? Dr. Houlihan?
Yeah, just a couple of them. So we're talking about renovation versus a new school, is that correct?
No.
We're talking about a new school. We're talking about a rebuild.
Could you talk,
It-
because the
it-
study, I mean.
Well, it
could
could,
you go
it could be
little
a
bit
combination,
further?
right? And as you said, this would be, we can discuss this, you know, before we commit to the exact plan, you know, but there are several options. One option is to use what was presented, I believe, they talked about keeping a building or two that was there.
The 8th grade wing.
But another option is, you know, again, talking to folks in the last 2 weeks, another option was to just completely, from the ground up, redo it.
And have some place where we could recognize Mr. Hawley or whatever
Absolutely.
it would be, because we had
Correct.
talked about that
Yes,
as well.
we would, and the proposal, again, I was looking at some of the things that were proposed as options, and one of them was to build it right on the exact site where it is now. So it would preserve that in the community. It would still be GC Hawley, it just would be newer.
Well, not doing this, in my opinion, would be crazy for us not to do this. It's simply put. So whatever this board needs to do, I'm for making the motion to do it right now.
All right, so your motion is to instruct the staff to complete the needs-based public school capital funds application?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Peace and a second by Ms. LeBrecq. Is there any further discussion?
Just
Yes, sir.
I know that there's no answer, but obviously the commissioners are aware of this and are aware of the amount of money involved, and I'm sure they probably haven't made a commitment yet, or perhaps they have, but anyway, it will really be interesting to know when they were going to make a decision, that kind of thing.
We have spoken with County Manager Phelps,
Okay.
who will be relaying the message to commissioners, and they will be voting very soon. So our first step was to get the support of our board,
Good.
and he will be getting, hopefully, the support of our commissioners. For me, it was an opportunity to see if this county could unify in a beautiful partnership, because this is one-time money, and $40 million and $2 million for all of us to create something on the southern end for a middle school, I just thought was a neat opportunity. So we should hear something soon from commissioners. Dr. Houlihan?
All right.
Great question.
Any further questions or discussion?
I think that was a great question in response to it. I just remember back when the commissioner said, no way for $20 million, so, you know, we can drop it down to 2. Amen.
Tell them we fundraised a little
I
bit.
think it's what we call a no-brainer.
Would it be beneficial for us to send an official request so it's documented?
I think it would be wonderful for us to officially ask for the funds. It would be most appropriate. Yes, sir.
All right.
Shall we amend the motion to include that?
We can if
To
Are you
approve asking
agreeing
the
with
commissioners for the
that we officially request that from the commissioners?
I have a question, though. Are we requesting that they give the $2 million only contingent upon whether we get the grant or not?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely.
I just didn't want them to have any reason to come back and say no.
Both of you okay with amending
They
your
don't need a
motion?
reason to do that, really.
All right, so the new, go ahead.
No, I was going to clarify the motion at some point.
So the motion is to instruct staff to prepare needs-based public school capital funds application, and that we officially request the 5% match to commissioners contingent on the approval of the request. All right. If you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Board.
Some of the best slate plans take 3.5 years to get there. But we're on the way.
Thank
All
you.
right, so our next item is the consolidation discussion. What I would see here is do you want to still have this discussion, or do you want to wait to see the outcome of this board?
I would recommend that we wait to see the outcome of this. We're not talking that long before we get the results of the, submission for the grant.
Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Yes, sir.
I'm okay.
I don't have a problem with that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
could I answer Dr. McKnight's question?
Uh-huh.
Dr. McKnight, it was counties designated as Tier 1, and the second was projects that consolidate 2 or more schools into a new facility. And so we are technically not consolidating, we're just rebuilding. So that was the second. So, but all the other boxes are checked.
Okay.
But we can point out consolidation prevention.
Correct.
Okay.
We could always consolidate.
Save that one to after. It's not open that can of worms yet. All right, so board members,
Mr. Chairman, I would
Yes.
just like to say that I had a proposal, permanent proposal, and I don't want to get into that because I feel relatively sure that we are not going to need to do that.
okay.
So, but I just wanted people to be mindful that if for some reason this don't work, I'll be back.
Yes, sir.
On that note, I'd like to encourage the entire district to start praying real hard that grant's approved.
All right, so board members, with your permission, we'll continue on in the meeting past the adjournment. We have a couple items we need to take care of before the attorney dismisses herself. And so we'll skip down to the Superintendent's Leadership Summit. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Thank you so very much. Is Mrs. Angela Cogdill present?
Maybe a little early.
It's all right. It's perfectly fine. She's on the way. It's all right. We will proceed. Board members, at your seat, you have a book entitled The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We will be using this at the Superintendent's Leadership Summit with students. Mrs. Angela Cogdill is assisting me with that work that day, along with Dr. Greg McKnight and Dr. Tom Houlihan. They are our board representatives assisting me with that project, along with several others in the community. And for one of the sessions, we would like to have board members contribute to what students learned that day. We are asking you to select one chapter out of this book and present to students in just 5 or 6 minutes. It can be an activity, it can be in words, it can be that you hand them something, it can be that you showcase in any way you'd like. Stephen Covey is renowned for his work on leadership. These are the same habits being taught at Wilton Elementary School. But we are working with middle and high schoolers for this leadership summit. So Mrs. Angela Cogdill, I believe we have a sign-up sheet. She's going to pass that around. If you all will sign up, if you look at the front, you'll see the chapters. If you will sign up, just sign up for the chapter you would like to lead, and we will get back with you. Okay? That is it. Just sign up for the chapter you would like to lead. That's it for us, Mr. Chair. We just want individuals to sign up for the chapter they will lead.
Okay.
Thank you so very much. The date is April 1st.
When do you want us to do this before we leave today?
Just before you leave today,
Okay.
if we may take that back up.
All right, so board members, if you'll be looking at that, and make sure you do that before you leave. All right, our next item of business is contact tracing and masking update. Madam Superintendent?
Thank you so very much. Miss Lauren Curtis. Mrs. Curtis? We sort of went a little faster than I believe everyone expected. So Mrs. Curtis is with us.
Hey, I can guarantee y'all, you'll get out before 10:45
We're
tonight.
guaranteed tonight. We need one official sign-up sheet, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, everyone got a sign-up sheet? Let's sign just one sheet to keep everyone from signing up on the same one, if that's okay. All right, Mrs. Curtis,
Ms. Williams, will you start your sheet around, and that way everybody can sign up?
thank you all. All right. Mrs. Curtis is leading our contact tracing and masking. I'm sorry, no PowerPoint, the Spectrum Internet is down.
That is okay. I've got it here on my computer, and I will use it for my notes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you. Or I was very efficient, and I closed that tab, so I will do this from memory. It's good to see everyone this afternoon. As you know, we had a flurry of activity at the end of last week when it came to masking, quarantining, just a lot of new announcements and new activities. So I'm gonna do my best to summarize those for you this afternoon. First, I'll start with the governor's press conference last Thursday. At that time, he announced some changes to Strong Schools NC that will take effect on March 7th. Those some highlights of those changes are that at that time, schools can consider going mask optional, and the governor and DHH Secretary Cody, also starts with a K, his last name, recommended that school districts and local governments begin to do that at that time because of changes in our trends across the state. There are a couple of other highlights from those proposed changes. One, that schools and districts promote vaccination as our best strategy to fight the spread of COVID in our community, but also, don't remove, our layered mitigations, right? So if we're going to take the masks away, then we want to make sure that we're continuing to distance. We want to make sure that we're continuing to participate in the testing program and continuing to encourage families to vaccinate their students. Some other changes, they recommended also, or they noted that masks would still be required for those students who are returning from a positive COVID diagnosis, and masks would still be required for those students that were exposed to COVID, either at home, in the community, or at school, even if the district was mask optional. At the same time the governor was having his press conference, our legislature was passing Senate Bill 173, thank you. The Free the Smiles Act. It requires districts to allow parents to choose whether or not their students will wear a face mask at school. It requires districts to have a process by which families can do that and an annual notification to families of that right. And it requires districts not treat students that choose not to wear masks differently from those students that do. This bill was passed by the legislature. It has not, however, been signed by the governor yet. If the governor chooses not to veto it and lets it sit on his desk, then it would become law on February 28th. However, if the governor vetoes it, that timeline could be pushed out a little bit, depending on the action that the legislature takes at that time. Attorney Dubison, do you have anything to add regarding that?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I think you've accurately summarized it. So if there is a veto, then it would go back to the legislature and potentially for an override.
Mm-hmm. So it could be stretched out a little bit longer, depending on what happens with the governor and any potential legislative action after that. There were a couple of caveats that we need to consider as we're thinking about what we're doing as a district right now. It's important to remember that there's a federal CDC order that still mandates masking on public transportation, and that would include all of our school buses and GCPS transportation. There's also some questions about how this might affect our students with disabilities under the IDEA and ADA. So there may be, as you're discussing today, some things we may want to consider. Should there be any other federal, state, or local mandates that we may need to comply with in the future? We also had the opportunity last week to speak with our public health partners. We spoke with Granville Advanced Public Health to talk about the new quarantine guidance that we have. They also continue to share that they think that until we are in low or moderate transmission, it's important that we continue to mask to protect those that are not able to be vaccinated, like our children under 5 in our community, our older population, and those that are immunocompromised. We also spoke with ABC Science last week and heard from them, just reiterating that we have the evidence that masking within schools works. We have the evidence that masking within our communities work. But with the data changing, it's important for each locality to look at what trends there are in their community to make a decision about what's best for that community. I think that is about all I had to share with you this afternoon. Dr. McLean, can you think of anything that we discussed that I neglected?
I think you've covered it.
So at this time, we will open it up, I believe, Mr. Richardson, for discussion.
Yeah. Board members, do you have questions for Ms. Curtis?
Yes, this, I couldn't get it up a few minutes ago because of the internet, but do we have our trend for what we have seen today?
We are still in high community spread for the last 7 days.
As far as our numbers, are they continuing to go down?
Of our school district, our Granville County Public Schools numbers, I have not finished updating the dashboard yet, but those numbers were, it just, as at a glance, over the last few days, continuing to go down. Yes, ma'am.
Would
Ms.
you
Curtis?
say that most of the cases are coming from community spread as opposed to school spread at this point?
Based on our contract tracing efforts, yes, ma'am, most of the students that are, well, to be clear, until today, students that were exposed at school could stay at school, but students that were exposed at home had to stay home for 5 days. And because of our contact tracing, we have been able to track where most of those cases, those students have been having contacts, and yes, ma'am, most of those contacts are outside of the school environment.
Thank you.
Dr. Lynn?
Ms. Curtis, how many school systems have gone to mask optional at this point? Do you know?
As of Friday, it was about half.
Okay.
I don't have a specific number as of today, because I know some boards met this morning.
Okay,
but
and
it
some
was-
of the, like Wake County, I believe, is going to
Hasn't met yet.
approve it.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think it's time that, given what the governor has done, and at this rate, I mean, it just seems to me that it's time to move forward. To me, maybe making it end effective when the governor has said, March the 7th would be in, I think that's the date, March 7th.
That is the date that the strong schools will be updated, yes, sir, with that recommendation.
And I just think it's time.
All right. Other questions or comments?
What?
Yeah, I just wanted to check, I think I heard something to the effect that CDC is already relooking things. Did I hear that on the news?
There is talk going on. They have, at this point, not changed their recommendation
Okay,
that
but there's-
students in K-12
there's
schools
discussion.
continue to mask, but there is discussion about that, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And another question with regards to, it was something that you said. You said masks will still be required for students returning from quarantine?
Yes, ma'am. So students that are returning from quarantine, either because they tested positive for COVID or returning,
Students returning that tested positive.
or,
you know,
or students that were exposed to a close contact, either at school or at home, would have to mask for a period of time after that positive COVID test or that COVID exposure. Yes, ma'am.
Is that part of the bill, 173?
That's part of the quarantine guidance that took effect
Okay.
today.
So that would not change that
No, ma'am.
part. I think one of the things that a lot of us have been concerned about was keeping our kids in school. And with the governor, with the guidelines changing for quarantining recently, I think that concern has been quite a bit lessened, so.
Yes, ma'am. We have, one, I think with the Omicron numbers going down, we've just certainly seen a lot fewer cases and therefore a lot fewer exposures. But the change in the quarantine rules in mid-January, where we stopped quarantining students at school for exposure caused a large drop in our quarantine numbers. And again, I think once we stop quarantining, as of today, for community and home exposure, we will continue to see those quarantine numbers go down. But those students, when they are notified of an exposure, will need to mask for 10 days.
Ms., oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I just want to note, I would say it is unclear how Senate Bill 173 would impact that.
Okay.
I mean, it's following a positive exposure that's a requirement, and it's a disease control measure from the DHHS, but I'm not sure we have sorted out yet whether 173 would override their ability to make those disease control measures.
Ms. Curtis, how are we implementing and monitoring who's being quarantined, who has to wear a mask for this period, X, Y, Z? How's that going to play out?
Yes, sir, that's a great question. So anytime we're notified of a positive COVID case, a student that's been exposed, or a student that's home sick with a COVID symptoms, our nurses are keeping track of that. The only information we're sharing with schools is the student's name, the day they can return to school, and the day that they are no longer required to wear a mask. So we've been doing that for the last few weeks already because of the current quarantine rules that fell off as of yesterday. And we are continuing to provide that information to schools so they can see what's the day that the student does not need to wear a mask any longer. But of course, at this time, we're mask required. But we are keeping track of that already, just so schools could be sure that they were making sure that those students were really being careful with their masking.
Other questions?
So I'm still trying to sort of understand. I have grands in another state that they have gone optional, but the parent is still saying, no, you're going to still wear your mask. So it's a decision then of the parents with regards to their child keeping that mask on or not, and some that will not, and some that will keep it on. How is that going to, you see that impacting? Well, you have children there that's going to definitely, because I have parents that said they will still make sure their child wear a mask. Then there will be some that don't. If something breaks out or, become visible there at the school, now whether if the ones that have a mask on or don't, how's that going to work? Everybody still have to go home for quarantine, and how's that work?
If they test positive, yes, ma'am, they would need to quarantine at home. Any exposures, however, students would be able to remain at school, but would have to wear a mask.
Okay, so when you say anybody that tests positive, okay, so everybody go test. The ones that don't test positive, then they can go back. Next step.
Unless Senate Bill 173 becomes law, in which case, I think,
I'm sorry, Mr. I could.
if 173 becomes law, which we just don't know, it would potentially override telling someone to wear a mask because they've been exposed.
It's a little unclear right now.
So she's telling you what the rule is under the quarantine rules, but that could be upended if this is signed or.
So are you saying, so if it gets signed, then we'll go through this again?
Then, right, well, if it is signed, then what it says is that parents can opt out and that those students who are not wearing a mask can't be treated differently. So I don't think that you could give them a different quarantine rule. Now, I don't think that impacts your ability to keep kids home who've tested positive or who've been exposed, because that's not about a mask, that's about your quarantine rules. So you
Right.
could adopt stricter quarantine rules.
Well, this rule or policy, what is it, one,
Senate Bill 173.
right? If the governor vetoes it, it's gonna get overridden, so the bottom line is, it's gonna become law, right?
I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know if what will happen with an override, but it's certainly a possibility.
Well, from what I understand, it got passed because there was enough votes to pass it, and no all Republicans voted for it and all Democrats didn't. That's the way of the world these days.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I don't see, based on what the governor said, I mean, he has some doubts about some things in it. So my thing is that he's going to probably veto it, and it's gonna go back. So it's just gonna take a little bit longer for it to happen, that's all. In my opinion, which is probably fact. Anyway, so I guess my point is, what we do here today is not going to make a whole lot of difference unless we decide to make Granville County mask option, really. And my question, if we do that, what does that do for the staff in terms of making sure that we are able to follow the law as it presented? Anybody?
One of the questions I have is more of an administrative kind of question, and that is this provision that's in the law, once that passes, or if it passes and becomes law, at that point, that's when the notification or the opt-out form would have to go out to parents. Is that my understanding?
Do you want to speak to the opt-out form, attorney?
So, right, it says it's effective when it becomes law, and that the public school unit shall adopt a process for parents to provide annual notification. So, I mean, my advice would be that there be a form of some sort for this year, and then in future years, it's the kind of thing you could put in your handbook along with all the other annual notifications.
Madam Vice Chairman, could you take over for just one moment?
I can.
All right. Board members, I'd like to offer a motion at this point. I'd like to move that we go mask optional on February 28th as Granville County, as long as we stay within the prevailing legal limits. So things such as transportation, those kind of things. Help me with my wording, attorney.
Mask optional except where required by any law or regulation that applies to the school. So that would be federally regulated Head Start classrooms. We might have a different rule depending on what transportation, and potentially if there was some specific disability, ADA-related situation that you needed to address.
And if I get a second, I'd like to speak to that, Madam Vice Chairman.
Second.
Okay. So this is my thought, kind of what Mr. Peace said, is sounds like it's going into effect either the 28th by the General Assembly or the 7th by the governor. I would like for us to be able to give the staff adequate time to prepare opt-out forms and safety measures for staff by getting them masking, those kind of things, and making sure we have all of our ducks in a row. Because I think what we may end up seeing is a switch. All those who talked about the infringement of their rights up to this point, it will flip the script now of those who may have questions about their safety. And so that gives our staff some time to work through that. But knowing that, as Mr. P said, the inevitable's coming. And that way we can at least kind of control it to a certain degree of giving them time to do their work. I know through conversations, emails, things like that we've gotten over the weekend, people want it right now. But if they can hang on with us the rest of the week to give you guys time, then I think that we can do this the right way and protecting our staff and students, which again, we've said from day one of your start is safety's paramount for us. And so I think this is kind of moving in that direction of where the rest of the state's going, but also doing it in a safe manner. So that would be the reason why I feel like we need to make this move.
May I ask a question? So I was just curious, so what happens then tomorrow whenever it says Granville County Schools go mask optional, and then we have a whole bunch of kids that show up and decide to,
Well, I say we
like they
go-
haven't read the fine print, you know what I mean?
Well, we already have people that swore up and down Friday that they could go mask optional today. People just got to read and listen. I mean, and unfortunately, I hate, because I'm sure we had teachers that had to spend instructional time today fighting that. But I would rather give our staff time to get this right, other than just letting a few individuals control the narrative because they've decided not to read what we've put out.
But do we need to take a full week? I guess I'm just curious.
Which
I'm just curious as to like, is it gonna take staff a full week, or is it something that could be put together a little bit sooner? I'm just curious.
I feel like it would, so.
This
But
date for your,
the 28th, which is Monday.
next Monday.
Yeah.
Attorney
Chairman
Newbison
Reed.
and I spoke about this earlier, and we want to make sure that we're meeting the legal requirements, as well as having time to talk with our principals about it, talk with our staff about how do we handle situations when, you know, perhaps there's conflict about you're wearing a mask, I'm not wearing a mask. We want to make sure that folks are prepared. So it's not just, to me, in the conversations I've had with staff since last week, that it's not just about preparing a form, but making sure that everyone is prepared to have conversations and make sure that all students are being treated fairly, no matter what decision they personally make or their parents make when they walk into our school buildings.
I think it's real important that the parents know about and understand how the bus situation will work. I'd hate to see some child not be able to get to school because somebody left them at a bus stop, didn't have a mask, or I'm sure somebody has an extra one, but still, that, and also how the quarantine rules will be until we have further clarification and by the powers that be. So I think that is important to do that. We're talking about 4 days.
I have to agree with her. There's no, you know, we've been going down this road, and now we're at a point that definitely they could get what, you know, some of the parents want, but don't just jump into it right all at once, because there's so many other things that they need. Make sure they fully understand, because what you mentioned about the bus, that they have to wear their mask on the bus, and they're gonna say, well, they can't wear, don't have them in school. Why do they have to wear them on the bus? We'll be getting back with that again and coming back and fussing about that. I am sure that I can hear that right now. So why is it then that you get to school, you don't have to wear it, but you gotta wear it on the bus? Did you say that was a federal?
Yeah.
Federal.
I think it's
Yes, ma'am.
Let them, so they'll know, go talk to the federal.
And, you know, as I'm looking at the legislation and we're talking about quarantine, I mean, one thing that you'll have to figure out is if, you know, we shortened quarantines or stay at home and greatly reduced the number of kids who are having to stay at home because they were wearing masks at school. So when they're not, there may, you know, if you have someone who's been exposed and isn't going to wear a mask, they may, you may have to look at how you are managing that.
Well, it gets back to the question that I asked that I didn't get no answer to.
Yeah.
That has to do with, I see Dr. McLean is looking at me like, the question was, as it relates to see staff, what we decide, staff have to make it work.
That's right.
And my question had to do with how long or if staff can make this work. Now, according to the motion, you got until next Monday to put it in place. And I don't have a problem with that, but I still wants to make sure that people understand, especially those folk that we've been hearing for the last 6 months, that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and what the restrictions are. There still is something. And you just can't do that between now and tomorrow morning, I don't think.
Any other questions? So the motion that we have on the floor is to go mask optional, except for where it is in conflict with federal law as of February 28th. And I guess we'll do a roll call vote. So, Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yeah.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
I wish it were earlier, but I vote yes.
Yes.
Dr. Julian? Okay. Motion passes.
Unanimous?
Hmm?
Was it unanimous?
Thank you for that.
I have one follow-up kind of question. When we get the guidelines out there, we're still encouraging the washing, the distancing, and the things that we need to do. Make sure we do that.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to still continue all our other mitigation measures.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Curtis or the staff related to this?
Does this mean we don't have to do our Granville public health stuff every meeting anymore?
I would leave that, she's asking if we'll still get a pandemic action report at each meeting.
After the 28th, Attorney Dubison, will you correct me with the federal Save the Smiles? I believe they removed the monthly mask vote.
If the 173 goes into law, you'll no longer have to vote each month.
Are we still going to do the report, though? Is my
But we-
question.
About the health department reporting.
The pandemic report.
We certainly can if this board would like, and we certainly can give occasional updates if this board would like. It
think
is
there
the
will be-
pleasure of the
I
board.
think for the time being, we need to keep the dashboard too.
Okay, we're happy to do, whatever the board would like. We'll bring one in March for certain,
Yes, ma'am.
okay?
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Madam
Thank
Vice
you.
Chair. All right, board members, our next item of business is the NCSBA Policy Services. You have a copy of this at your seat, and it was also sent to you. And so I'll turn this over to Dr. McLean. Oh, and we have Ms.
Thank you.
Sheep.
Yes, I'm so happy. It looks like Spectrum got the service restored, so I'm pleased. I'll introduce this, and then I'll turn it over to Attorney Sheaf. And Attorney Dubison, I'll have you chime in a little bit in here. We've been working to make certain we have all of our policies with a thorough review. I'm just one, to make certain we have things in order as a board. This is something we used to have as a Board of Education, and research suggests that this board had this service back in 2004. It's not been since that time, and in reviewing, I'd like to recommend we consider reinstating this service. You have bullets here that would be reinstated, a thorough review of all existing board policies to achieve various goals, ensuring that everything is taken care of, and then we have an opportunity for some custom policies in which several boards with the state of North Carolina does. This work is done with the North Carolina School Boards Association, and you see the cost. I bring this to you this afternoon in an effort to make certain the work we do every day as it relates to policy is accurate and legal. And of course, the North Carolina School Boards Association makes it very clear that your best work is always done with your school board attorney. So we have engaged our board attorney with bringing this to you. I share this with you with detailed bullets here because I want you to be very clear that this will still require the work of our executive team to some degree, but not the magnitude to which they are currently having to dig in to look at every single detail. But it will require you to also make certain you are paying attention to every policy update we bring you. The other recommendation I'm bringing to you at this time is to consider another strategy that we've grappled with, and that is to create one additional board committee to make certain we're paying close attention to policies, and that's to have a board policy committee. We have the academic committee, the finance committee, and the operations committee, but to create a board policy committee that pays deep attention to policies is a strategy used by many boards of education across the state of North Carolina. So I share that with you this afternoon so that you may also consider that strategy as well. Let me turn it over to Dr. Sheaf.
Can I add one thing to what you had said there? One of the ideas that I think we had discussed about this board policy committee was having someone represent our finance committee, our academic
That's right.
committee, and our operations committee. Because those intersect our policies, then that way you'd have the input of what's going on in your first committee to take back
Take
to
it
the board
back.
policy committee. So
Yes.
just kind of be thinking about that. So if you're interested, just know that we would be asking you to serve on 2 committees at that point. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We have invited Attorney Christine Sheaf from the North Carolina School Boards Association to shed light on this further. So at this time, Attorney Sheaf, will you talk with us for just a bit, please?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me at your meeting today and giving me the opportunity to speak with the board about this project. I am the Director of Policy and Legal Counsel for the School Boards Association, and I have worked with a number of boards on getting started with this. We have 8 attorneys on staff, all of whom do some policy work with local boards of education. So we have lots of experience in projects like this. As Dr. McLean mentioned, the board did a policy manual review back in the early 2000s, and since that time has the responsibility for updating the school system has chosen to do itself. There are certain sections of your policy manual that you all have done a very good job keeping up to date. There are other sections that we have done a bit of research into and located that you might need some help bringing those up to date. It is an overwhelming task at sometimes. The School Boards Association issues updates to its policies to lead the schools manual twice a year, and there are typically in those updates generally anywhere from 25 to 40 policies. So again, you're looking at potentially 25% of your manual needing to be reviewed each year. So in talking with Mr. Richardson and Dr. McLean, it sounded like the best project for your board, given where you are, is to go ahead and undergo a full policy manual review. And the way that would work is that we would assign one of the attorneys here in our office to work directly with the Granville County Board of Education. And that person would actually start with any section that you would like. So your current policy manual currently follows the same numbering system that our model policy manual follows. There are 9 sections, the 1000s through the 9000s. Boards typically start when they do this project with the 1000s, although you could start with a different section if you would like. And the attorney that's assigned to your project would sit down with our policy manual, Policies to Lead the Schools, and they would sit down with your current manual, and they would go section by section in reviewing your policies, seeing how they differ from the PLS version of the policy, and to the extent that there are items that we feel would be important to the board, bringing those over from your current policy. So I just want to show you what it would look like in terms of what you would get with each section. So this is an example of can everyone see that? Just a Word document?
Yes.
Okay. So this is an example of a policy. This is a sample. It's not from the Granville County Manual. This is just a sample policy to show you. We start with the PLS manual policy. So we start with the policy that's in our PLS manual, and then we revise it to the extent that there are things in your policy that differ from that and that are optional. A lot of our policies are based on the law, and so there may be things that can't be changed in the policy because the law requires that it be done that way. There are certain state laws that are very specific about how families be given notice of something, for example, and there are certain federal laws that are very procedural based that we couldn't change those things. But if there were things like you can see in this sample policy defining what constitutes a day, the board could change that from what's in the PLS policy if it wanted to and also just looking down, going into a description of a grievance and what exactly that is. So, so this is what you would receive, and again, you would get an entire set. So you get the 1,000s as a set marked up for each of those policies. We do know that your policy manual has some policies that are the most recent version of the PLS policy, so you wouldn't get a policy in those circumstances to review. But what we would do is, in addition to sending the sample policies, and Dr. McLean, I can certainly send you what I have presented after the meeting if you'd like to share it with the board. What we would send you is a policy table that goes along with the draft that we're sending you. So for each policy, we would have the policy number, the title of the policy, and any notes that the board should consider as they review the policy. And again, this is not from the Granville County Manual, this is just a sample. But you might have a policy on here where the note would just say, your board already has the most up-to-date version of this policy, so we have not forwarded a new draft for your review. Or alternatively, we could send you, as is reflected on this sample, we could send you something where it says, we have revised the policy. If you look down here, we modified this policy to reflect your current practices and let you know what is different from what's in the PLS manual. And that way you would be able, as a board, to look at and see that what's marked up are the things that are in your current policy manual, and you could decide if you want to continue to have things work that way. We have had boards who undertake this review and discover that there's something in the policy manual that's not actually consistent with the way that it's being done. And so then you can have that conversation about whether or not you want to stick to what's in the policy manual, or if you want the policy to reflect a different way of doing things. So those are the written materials that we would send to you. This process, there is some flexibility built into it in terms of how the board wants to undertake it, but typically what we try to do is we try to send one set of policies every 8 to 10 weeks. And there are 9 sections in the manual. However, 2 of them, the 4,000s, which are students, is very, as you can imagine, that's a pretty weighty section. And the 7,000s, which are also very weighty because that's the personnel section. We typically split those in 2. So over the course of 2 to 3 years, the board would get, typically it would be 11 packets. You would get all of them in one section except for those 2. If you wanted to break it out further, we could certainly do that. But typically the process takes 2 to 3 years, just depending on, how the board wants to proceed with that. As I mentioned earlier, we do updates twice a year. And while you are going through the manual review process, you would be getting all of those updates as well. So the goal would be that once the board gets to reviewing the last section of reviews and updates and has adopted those, you have a fully up-to-date customized manual that reflects the thinking of the board in Granville County. And I want to underline that because we do start with the PLS manual as the base, and in part that's because we know that the PLS manual reflects the current law and requirements, but this is the Granville County Board of Education's policy manual. And we, throughout the process, the attorney that's assigned to work with you will talk with staff and with board members, if that's how you choose, to talk about the changes that you want to make. There may be times that we would say, this is a situation where you might want to talk to your board counsel about how to rework that. But we work with you to make sure that you are getting the policy manual that you want at the end of the process. So that was a mouthful. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I think I went through that pretty quickly. I think one thing that Dr. McLean mentioned is the amount of staff time that's been involved in keeping up with policy changes and updates. And through this process, our office does all of the clerical work. We work with the senior staff to incorporate changes they may have to suggest to the board when the board is reviewing drafts. We make all of those changes. Once the board approves a draft, we clean up the policy for you and we get it posted for you. So it really does take that administrative burden off of the Granville County staff and frees them up to spend more time being able to focus on educating children.
Okay, board members, do you have questions for the attorney related to this proposal? So essentially what we're bringing to you today is this proposal that would be over the span of 2 to 3 years. There's two things that's going to require of you. The time to go through those policies. Not only does the board policy committee have to do that, but then it comes back to the full board. So just remember that piece. And then the second piece is they need your money. And so we've got to pay for that as well.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
I need to know approximately how much time by having this from the association is going to free staff up from having to do what they are doing at present.
A significant amount of time. You can see their heads, Mr. Pease.
That, well, actually, that question was to the young lady that was, I mean, I assume she's, what's her name? Miss She.
Oh,
She's still
I'm
there?
sorry.
I assume you have done this policy for other school systems?
Oh, yeah.
We have done a policy manual for other school districts. I don't know that I could give you a number of hours, but again, just in terms of the updates that we're pushing out each year, there are from 50 to 80. So if we do the updating for you, which we're doing through this process, we're doing all of the clerical work through the process. That's time that your staff is not spending. In other words, right now, what you all are doing is you get an updated version, but it's entirely on the staff to do all of the updating, the revising, all of that. And we do that piece for you. We take over that piece of it during this process.
I just need to know that, I guess, from the staff that it's worth the finances that cost us to do this. I mean, because time is money, and when we have our people doing stuff that they really need to do on other things like making sure teachers are teaching and doing all those things.
Absolutely.
I just want to be sure that we are getting the biggest bang for our buck, that's all. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
And
Yes,
I
sir.
can, having been through this with a few times, I can give a sense of what the process is like. So the School Board Association will send these updates, and then if you have the policy committee, because you guys have seen sometimes the update will come on the board, and there's 20 policy updates on there, and some of them require deep analysis, and some of them are just, technical corrections. And so by having a policy committee, you have a committee of board members who will look at the ones that require decision-making and have a recommendation, so that when it comes to the full board, you can see, well, 3 board members have already looked at this and developed this and have already asked the questions, and then we can also sort of sort them into, these ones are important for you to read through and understand, and these are just legal updates. So that's one reason it helps. And I think to answer your question, Mr. Pease, part of what has happened is that you've been in crisis, staff have been in a crisis mode for a couple of years, and so this policy updates gets pushed to the bottom of the list, and so as a result, it hasn't happened. And that's, because they are so overwhelmingly doing educational tasks, and so that's sort of, and it has come up a few times where we, some situation comes up and we look in the policy and say, ooh, that's out of date. But we haven't had the capacity to do like a systematic going through and seeing which ones are out of date.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will say, Mr. Pease, it was a good question, and I should have had some more detailed data available about that, and I can get that for you. I just do not have it at my fingertips right now. But I can certainly let you all know, we do have time studies done that show how much time we spend working on policy manuals, but it's a significant amount of time that our administrative staff and then also our attorneys spend doing that work.
Other questions or comments, board members?
And for me, when we sit in hearings, I'm sorry, go right ahead, dear.
I was actually just going to ask, I was a little curious about the custom policy manual costs and then the project and the waiving of the fees and all the things. Can you just go over that a little bit more so it's a little more clear?
Yes, Ms. Sheaf, we're asking about the cost and the discount, custom policy manual versus other. Will you talk about that for just a moment?
Sure. So the typical cost of a full custom policy manual is $29,900. Granville County has already converted to our numbering system. And so there's some work on the front end that does not have to be done. And in light of that, we have provided for a 20% discount off of that price. So that brings the price down to $23,920. There is a small project built in, so that would be the cost of the manual review. It's $23,920. Now, in looking at that cost, I would ask you to keep in mind that you're currently paying $2,500 a year for access, for subscribing to our PLS manual. And that cost would be waived over, you would save $7,500 over the course of the 3-year contract if you were to undertake this project. There is an additional not to exceed price of $3,500. One of the things that we discovered as we were doing research is that some of the revision history and adopted dates on your policy manual have unfortunately been, the revision history has not been kept fully. And so we would have to go back and recreate that revision history for you. The price that we have quoted for that is $3,500. That was, again, a not to exceed price. And we are looking at what we're trying to do now is analyze exactly how long that situation has gone on and to narrow that down. And I'm confident with what we found that we can do that for less than the $3,500, but it would absolutely not cost more than the $3,500.
And this is spread over 3 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that so basically you're saying that the $23,920, that would be like $7,600, but you're not charging us the $2,500 additional each year on top of that. So basically we would, if you weren't doing that, we'd be spending like almost $11,000 on a monthly basis, but you're giving us that break. So I just want to make sure that's accurate. That's
A yearly
Yes.
base?
Yearly basis.
right.
On an annual basis, yes.
11,000 annually, but then they're taking off the 2,500, so that brings it down. Okay, I just wanted to
Yes.
make sure I had that understood.
That's correct.
So it would be the $23,920 plus the $3,500 for the revision history corrections. But again, that would be spread over 3 years.
And that does not include the amount you're taking off for the subscription.
No, that would be the price. I was just making the point that you're,
Yep.
by entering into the manual contract, we waive the cost of a PLS subscription. So there is a savings to you of $7,500 because you now pay $2,500 a year for that, and you would not pay that all during the 3-year contract.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so this does come to you as an action item today. What would be the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion, we accept it.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. Williams and a second by Ms. LeBrecq to approve the NCSBA policy proposal as presented. Is there any further questions? All right, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. All right, we look forward to working with you, Ms. Sheaf.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you, and I will follow up with Dr. McLean about the details.
Okay.
Thank you, Attorney Sheaf. Thank you to the
Thank you
School
so
Boards
much.
Association.
All right, board members, we're going to do one more item, and that's the Masonic Home for Children update before we take a break. And so, Madam Superintendent?
Absolutely. I'm delighted to call to the podium at this time our friend and neighbor right down the street, Mr. Kevin Otis, Director of the Masonic Home for Children. We had been talking about partnership for another project, but he comes to us this afternoon with another idea. So welcome, Mr. Otis.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Really? Hello, everybody. Good to see y'all. Look, I've got this nice fancy thing written up. I'm gonna make it nice and simple for everybody. Anytime I start one of these conversations lately, the way I've started it is, I don't know nothing about nothing when it comes to talking about what we're talking about. So what I do want to do on this occasion is start out by saying thank you to everybody with Granville County Public Schools for your partnership with our kids. I would argue and say we may have the largest family in the district, and we really appreciate all the supports that you've provided us. And I want the board to know this, that we have had 2 tutors that have come forward that the Granville County Public Schools is helping us with for our kids. And we've also had 2 separate graduation ceremonies for young men, one in July and one in December, where the superintendent, folks on the board, principals, counselors have come to see these young men walk across our room or our front porch so they could go ahead and graduate. And I just want to tell you, they are the first ones in their family to ever graduate from high school. And that is a huge accomplishment, and we appreciate everything that you do to help us out. For this situation, we had a person who's affiliated with the home who came forward and said, look, I know some people that would like to do a charter school on your campus. And you've got a long history of it. You've got a bunch of resources. It would be steady income for the home. So what we did was we started talking about it. I talked with Dr. McLean first of all. And we've put together an ad hoc committee to look at what is possible. In my mind, we've got 4 options. 1 is to put a charter school on campus. 2 is to do nothing. 3 is to have a partnership between these private financiers and the school district. Or 4, to go ahead and do a partnership between the Children's Home and the Granville County Public Schools. My way of thinking is, well, I've already talked with our vision committee. We're not really in favor of putting a charter school on our campus, primarily because we think it would deflect resources from the school district, and what few kids may benefit from, other kids, it may not help them out. So we're not that interested in that. I don't think the private financiers want to do any type of partnership. So here we go. Do you guys want to do something with us or not? That's kind of what I put out there. In that regard, we have a long history. Nettie Bemis came to the Children's Home, to Oxford Asylum at that point in time, back in the late 1800s. And her idea was, it's not just about school, which they did a very good job at the John Nicholas School about educating kids, but it was also about giving them some type of trade or work experience or an opportunity to go ahead and learn how to be good employees for your future life. And that's what she did. Back in those days, the kids had 4 hours of school, 4 hours of work, and 2 hours of either study hall or sports programming. So they had 10 structured hours every day to get something done, and it worked really well for them. They've gone on to be very successful. That's our history. What we want to do today, quite frankly, I don't know. I just know that we have had an opportunity. It's come forward, and in processing it, it would appear that the Masonic Home for Children at Oxford and Granville County Public Schools may be able to do something for our kids. Some of the things that we've talked about is, could we have a pre-trade school for maybe middle school students? Could we do something where the culture of that school, whatever that looks like, could be preparing young persons to be responsible employees? Is there some way to even have a donor that provides funds and the kids can go ahead and get some money through the whole process and be able to learn how to manage their money and learn how to be responsible in those contexts? So I don't come with any solutions. Like I told you, I don't know about all this stuff. But I did come with an opportunity that came to us. We processed it with folks to try to see what the best option is, and to just put it out there. There may be something that we can do. I mean, we've got a gym and a cafeteria and a pool and ball fields and a farm and farm buildings. we've got some resources that we could put to use, not only for the kids on our campus, for kids in this district. So, Madam Superintendent, that's kind of what I wanted to say, unless there's any questions.
Sounds great. So, Mr. Chair, sounds like wonderful neighbors. We just need to all put our thinking caps on to see what it is we might be able to develop and create together.
Very good.
Any questions?
How many students are you serving currently at the Masonic home?
Currently, we have 41 kids on campus. One of those children is 4 years old, so we're looking to grow, and that's one of the things. The more positive programming that we can put into place, the more of a draw that is, because we all know child welfare has changed dramatically in the last several years, but what we're doing is fantastic, and we know that more kids can benefit from those services.
Other questions?
I don't have a question. I think it's an opportunity really for us to partner with the Masonic Home for Children. And I'm thinking, they have a lot of room to operate up there. And which means that I'm sure that we come with some kind of trade kinds of things like masonry, electricity,
Yes.
welding, whatever we can come up with that can work with us, because number one, I appreciate you not talking to the charter school folks. That's number one. And I'm a bottom line kind of person.
Yes.
And so I think, between the two systems, we could certainly come up with enough options for students to want to do some things up there. So I'm for this board putting on the thinking caps and trying to come up with working with you guys to come up with a program that'll work for the children.
Yes, I want to say the same as Mr. Peace. This is a great, great opportunity for the county. And, we're out there trying to ensure that our students and the community, get the best of everything. And as he was saying, a trade or something, this is great to pull some people back, possibly pull people back from some of the charters, but back into something that they see very, very exciting for their children. Thank you.
I love the idea of the middle school trades. I know that there was a task force that we were on recently that we had some business owners in the area that they were saying that interest in trades has really taken a dip. And so for them to have an apprenticeship and have kind of a venue where they can have students that are coming with that specified interest would be really helpful. So I really love that. Plus the fact that you have a pool and we don't would be great. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of interesting things that we could do to partner together for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the middle school age range, when you consider all the labs that the Granville County Public Schools has for trade development, and when you also look at what Vance Granville Community College has, what we want to do is get folks, young persons, interested early on and start developing and making those steps. And we do have 6 lanes in the pool, by the way. So. 25 meters.
It's a heck of a lot closer than where are they going to now?
That'd be great.
All right. Mr. Otis, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to you and the superintendent coming back and discussing some options with us.
Sounds great. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Otis. Thank you.
All right, board members, it's 3:27. I say we go ahead and adjourn until 4 o'clock, and so I would take a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
How long? Okay. 15 minutes, so 3:45, we'll come back.
So moved.
I was trying to get to my 10:45, sorry. All right, do we have a motion that we adjourn until 3:45?
Second.
Who was the motion?
Ms. LeBrec.
Brett, he said
Okay.
Ms. Anderson, second.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed. All right, we're adjourned till 3:45.